Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Lee, and I am with Core Medical. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and today I am really looking forward to sharing a little bit more about suicide, building awareness around it, and really why we're seeing such a surplus and a need to address this right now in our communities and in our societies. Um, and especially because it is, Suicide Awareness Day. September, we focus a lot on how do we support people through this as it's part of the month. And so I'm glad to kind of share some tips and tricks with all of you, as well as really what is causing some of these things to, you know, just exponentially blow up in our society. So, one of the things that I really focus on, and if you have ever listened to any of my presentations before, I focus on this a lot, but we are so absolutely connected, and we are more connected than any point in history, meaning through social media, through our cell phones, through any of those type of things. However, we also report being the most isolated than any other time in history. So it's really funny. A lot of people go, well, how is that even possible? How can we be so connected, through technology, through the phones, through all of this other stuff, but we feel more isolated? People are reporting this. Well, a big piece of this is because technology is almost a facade for connection. So we say we're connected to human beings, but really we're connected to devices. And we're going to talk about how that impacts us pretty negatively in this as well. So a big piece of this is that our societies and our world is way more connected to devices, to technology, to a essentially robotic thing rather than human people. And what that does is it really shifts the wiring in our brain, right? So think about how often we are online or um, we're sitting here on a computer talking to people or on our phone talking to people or scrolling through social media, right? Most people work remotely, especially in the United States, but globally that has increased significantly as well. We feel compelled most of the time to be on our phones or our laptops or our iPads or whatever 24/7, right? We got to check our emails. We got to, do this. We got to look at Facebook. We got to look at Instagram. We got to TikTok. We got to do whatever, right? So we're digitally connected 24/7, even when we go on vacation. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Um, but a lot of times what happens is this increases our stress, right? And especially in marginalized communities, is it really increases the stress level we're feeling. It creates this feeling of being overwhelmed or unable to control stuff, right? Our anxiety hits the roof, our depression hits the roof, and all of that kind of stuff comes down on us. And so it increases our risk of feeling isolated and lonely and overwhelmed. So social media is huge in this. And again, anybody who has ever listened to a presentation I've done before really understands this. Social media is huge problem. It can also be a connection point. So I don't want to hound on it completely. However, what happens is a lot of time we scroll through, and I say Facebook because I am not uber connected in social media world. Facebook is about my thing, but I know Instagram is really big with this. I know TikTok can be really big in this, but we scroll through this and what we find is a lot of facades, a lot of false positive things, right? We minimize our social interaction with other human beings, which again impacts our brain. It changes our brain chemistry. We'll get into that in a couple slides. But we minimize that, we increase our technology focus, and then we start getting FOMO, right? Fear of missing out of things. We start comparing our lives to other people's lives. We start doom scrolling. We get caught on a bad news story and we just start scrolling down all the bad things that are happening in the world. We feel overwhelmed. We feel anxious. We feel lack of control. We feel upset. Um, and that also impacts how we interact with the world because we typically interact with the world much differently online than we would in real life. And again, we'll explain that in just a moment. But really, this is what it does to the brain, right? So, what social media does is it activates the brain reward system by releasing dopamine, which is like our feel good hormone, right? We talk about that a lot. And it says, okay, this is pleasurable, right? I like this. I like to be connected. And, I like to get the likes and the hearts and the smiley faces, all the things that happen with it. And it gives us this sense of reward. So, what it does is then we keep wanting to do it. So, I really love this quote by Anna Lembeck, and it says the smartphone is the modern day hypodermic needle delivering digital dopamine 24/7. And that's true, right? If we think about it, how often are we looking at social media? How often are we looking at our emails or watching YouTube or doing all these things? We are constantly connected. And so we're called a wired generation because of that, right? We can't set our phones down. We can't set our laptops down. We can't set our iPads down. It's really hard for us to do, and oftentimes we frame it more as this is our relaxation time, when really it's not causing relaxation at all, right? It's actually having the opposite effect of that. So here's what happens, right? This is what happens in our brain. Again, we have our phones with us 24/7, so we get that ding, right? That notification, ding, you have something on social media. We go, oh my goodness, what is it? We look at it, we see whatever it is, we see how many likes, how many hearts, how many laughs, how many whatever, and it gives us that feel good. So what do? We post something else, or we go after more, or we respond to everybody, or we do something like that so we can get more of this dopamine impact to us. And what it does is it creates a pathway in our brain saying this is the only place I can get reward from, right? And the more we work that pathway, the more we do it, right? Because that's what our brain does. Our brain loves pattern predictable things. And once we make that a pattern predictable thing, it just keeps going, right? We're never going to stop because it's something that's kind of ingrained in us. We'll talk about how to break that and what to do later. One part I do really want to focus on is with kids. So, kids, this happens twice as quick. And the hardest part is it actually develops their brain in a very negative way, right? So, technology has such a huge influence on attention, on anxiety, on ability to make decisions, on ability to think through things, and on memory and learning. Huge in kids. So we have a epidemic in this country and the United States, but again across the world as well, where kids are getting diagnosed with attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder out the wazoo. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. However, one of this is because our kids are so wired as well, and they're so used to getting that reward in 5 or 10 seconds, right? So quick, 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 and it's just pounding them all the time. Well, what that does is when they're sitting in a classroom and their teacher is speaking, but they're not entertaining them every 10 seconds, they can't hold their attention. It's hard for them to do. They have to wiggle, they have to move, which some of this is part of kids, right? Kids need to do this, but they also can't focus because they're so used to getting that 10-second reward. So we really want to disengage kids from media as much as possible. We don't want them to be hooked on it, and we also don't want to give it to them to help them calm down. Okay. Again, we'll talk about why this is really important, but for kids, what's really important is once they learn young that the only way I can calm down is with a screen, that's the only way they're going to be able to do it forever, right? Their brain patterns form really quick. And when we show them you can't do anything else to calm yourself, then they really feel like they can't do anything else than to calm themselves. So how is this also true for adults? Well, let's talk about this. When we see a social media post, and I would be very interested how many raised hands, if we were all together, would say this. We create an opinion. So let's use a hot topic. We'll say we see a political post, and it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on, but you see a provocative political post, and then what happens? Well, it elicits a strong emotion from us. Positive, negative, whatever that looks like, but it elicits this very strong reaction. And what do? We tend to act impulsively because with media, it shuts down that filter because we have the filter with the screen. We have the filter through the computer. So we don't necessarily have to think through our words because if we're not interacting with that person in person, it's easier to say things, right? We don't have to have that filter, or we don't think we do. And so we react impulsively. A lot of times we'll spout something off that we traditionally wouldn't say, or we say something that type something up or respond to the post that might be out of anger or frustration or even sadness or hurt or even passion, right? Any of those things. And we start responding really impulsively to that. What happens then is our thought patterns shift because they shift to the emotional part of our brain, which is that reactive part, rather than that cognitive part of our brain, which is thinking through that situation. Now, when we're in person, how this differs is that we tend to say, okay, social cue. Um, I have to monitor how it feels in relationship with this person for the rest of the afternoon, the rest of the day. And so I'm probably going to filter my words differently. I'm going to think about how I'm going to present my argument or present my point differently because I have to interact with this person in person, right? If I just spout something off, we might end up getting in a discourse and that could lead to something major down the road. But if I'm doing this online, it doesn't matter because I don't have to worry about that in the moment. And then it just creates this addictive pattern of that, right? So again, social media is really linked strongly with anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and physical ailments. Um, a lot of this is just because we create these patterns where we're getting a reward from something that isn't necessarily rewarding or relaxing. It's more stressful than it is the opposite way. So, what do we do about this? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell everybody is, especially if you are feeling depressed or anxious or have any suicidal thoughts, we need to build connections with our people. We need to find our people, right? And I think sometimes this is a really hard thing for us to do because we we tend to interact only online, and then it makes us not want to go out of our house. It makes us not want to, go see people or go do things. But what we want to do is say, hey, we need to create these relationships. We need to build healthy habits and connections, which means we have to go see people in person. Now, this is true with people who have kids or who don't have kids. I joke with people all the time, but I have mom friends who have kids my kids' age just so we could have 5 minutes. So the kids go play in the living room and we sit in the dining room and listen and have coffee. And yes, sometimes we get interrupted, but we also understand each other and we're connected because we understand that our kids are distracting, right? But you also need time without that. You need time without distraction. So one of the things I give tips on couples a lot of time, but I think this is good with family or with friends or whoever, is go have social media timeouts. Social media vacations, right? Meaning we don't get on our phones, we don't get on our iPads, we don't get on TV, we don't do any of that stuff for a certain amount of time. And it could just be a few hours. When we go out to eat, I can't tell you how many times we get comments around, wow, your kids are on your phone watching something or doing something. And we say, no, it's really important for us just to be here engaged with them. They need to learn how to monitor themselves while being in a restaurant, right? Without a screen. They don't need that. And so, even doing that with each other, there's so many people when you go to a restaurant, they might be on a date or they might be with their family, and how many of them are on their phone? Right? They're not looking at each other, they're not engaging with each other, which actually means we're pulling our distance away, right? We're tearing that relationship further apart rather than connecting together, which is the opposite thing of what we want to do. So implementing these social media vacations can be really helpful, but I just say implementing any media vacation, even TV, right? If that's a big thing for everybody. So how did we get here? This is a lot. I hear a lot of people, and especially when we're in different generations, how did we get here? This never used to be this way. How did it work? Well, it did, right? We got here slowly and we didn't get here overnight. However, we got here through different steps and different things that have occurred in our lives. So let's look at that. Now I'm going to focus a little bit on the pandemic because what we really saw is that exacerbated suicide rates. Now, what happened is that when everybody was isolated, we became more clued into our phones and social media because that was the only way that we could engage with people, right? And so that was something that became really, really big. But then it built as a habit over time, and now it's really hard for us to break that habit, right? The other piece is we're spending way more time at work than we are at home, even if we're working from home. Now, this confuses people a lot. But what happens is when we work from home, we tend to work longer hours or we tend to work really sporadically, right? So it's if I take off an hour to go to a doctor's appointment, I'm working 2 hours extra in the middle of the evening to make up for that. So it really depends how we're doing that, but we're working a lot more. And so we're not connected with our family as much. We're not connected with our outside community as much. Again, the other pieces is we have mental health issues, and the phone and the technology does not help that. So we become desensitized to things. We look for advice on TikTok for our anxiety or our ADHD. We diagnose ourselves based on people who are talking on TikTok versus actually looking for a professional and doing that kind of stuff and working through the problem, right? We just say, well, I saw a 10-second video on TikTok. This is what I have. This is what I need to do. And then it doesn't work. And we feel even more discouraged than we did before, right? The other piece is we get less connected to ourselves. So what we do is we distract ourselves with our phone or our social media and we desensitize ourselves to ourselves. So we can't feel how we're feeling in our body until it's almost overwhelming, right? We're not connected. We will mindlessly eat things that maybe don't make us feel good, or we'll mindlessly watch things that don't make us feel good. We'll do that doom scrolling or that we call it a black hole sometimes. We know, you get sucked into YouTube and you watch it for 4 hours and all of a sudden we don't know where life gone, but we feel anxious and overwhelmed and we know we're not supposed to do that, right? That also has an impact on our physical health. When our physical health declines because we're so plugged in and it's hard for us to get away or go spend time outside or working out or walking and all of that kind of stuff, then our mental health also declines, right? Um, they are so interconnected. We see people who suffer from intense depression or anxiety, who are battle heart disease, or who battle obesity, or who battle other ailments just because our body doesn't know how to function anymore, right? We were way more active 20 years ago than we are now because the access to technology and instant gratification was far less. And so that's really how we got here. Little by little, it's all kind of come to this point. So let's talk a little bit about suicide rates and how they've increased. So between 2000 and 2022, in America, suicide rates increased 36%, right? Even in the last 3 years, the data is still being collected, but we're still pretty close at 36%, which is a huge number. So if we think about that, that's over 1 in 3 people, right? So if you take 3 of your friends, it's 1 in 3. It's one of us, right, who has either attempted suicide or completed suicide. So that's a huge number when we really think about that. 77% of global suicides have occurred in low to middle income countries. A lot of that has to do with hopelessness and not feeling like there's a way out, right? So, again, this like feeling of just being trapped is a really big piece of this. And stigma still contributes to the statistics, right? When people are feeling suicidal ideation or thoughts, a lot of times they worry about reaching out because they don't want people to kind of bombard and freak out and lose their mind over it. It's more of like, I want to keep it to myself and then nobody can connect with me, nobody understands, nobody's going to be able to help me. And so we really have to work on how we frame this and how we help these people who are in crisis. Um, a few more things that are really important to note is suicide is the second cause of death among children, especially in the ages from 10 to 14, and the second cause of death for ages 20 to 34. Again, that's a huge number. Um, and a lot of this is caused through cyberbullying, through increased anxiety and depression due to like connection with social media, as well as having it outside. It's really hard to get away from this stuff, right? So we need to really pay attention to our kids and our young adults in this because they're the ones who are feeling most isolated, alone, and having a lot of this mental health stuff come up as well. The other piece of suicide is much more prevalent in adult men than it is in women. And I say that because a lot of times I think we think it's opposite. Women tend to have more thoughts and more feelings of suicidal ideation, but men are really the ones who complete it. We see that, and I'll give a different statistic in a minute, but that is a huge one. Also, people with disabilities are believed to be on a higher risk for suicide than those without. Again, that feeling of being trapped is a really big piece of this. So that's going to be a theme in this, right? I feel trapped. I don't feel like there's another way out. This is the only thing I feel like I can control. So let's talk about what populations are the most vulnerable. So in 2023, we learned that males were at a 4 time higher rate than females for suicide, right? And that's completion of suicide. And so um, when we think about it, males make up 50% of the population, but 80% of the suicides. That's a huge statistic to think about. We also see that males, kind of later in life are really feeling when they start feeling trapped and useless and not able to fulfill something, that really creates this dichotomy of like, what do I do with my life now, right? And so it's really about focusing how do we refocus our life to bring meaning and purpose to it rather than feeling lost and hopeless around it. Females are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide or report ideation, meaning suicidal thoughts, but they're less likely to complete suicide, right? And we have lots of theories around why that is. And reality is I think it's more females talk a little bit more. Females have that more emotional piece where usually males really struggle with that and they struggle with feeling weak, right? That's that stigma that comes in. And so a lot of what I'll talk about supporting is how do we support people about where they're at, but also destigmatize some of the feelings that people might be having. Nearly half of the LGBTQ youth are have considered attempting suicide in the past year. This is according to the Trevor Project survey. Again, lack of resources, feeling really alone, all of that really contributes into some of these marginalized communities. And then those who experience addiction are 4 times more likely to attempt or complete suicide than others. A lot of times it's with addiction, it could be that when we're feeling really, in a place where our brain isn't working correctly, we can't think through the consequences of this, is really when that starts happening, right? And again, that feeling of trapped, that hopelessness, I can't control anything else, is a really big piece of this. People who experience abuse in childhood or domestic violence are 3 times more likely. And then rates among active duty military members are at an all-time high. So that's one that we also really keep an eye on. And again, a lot of stigma around that. The military is trying to do a really good job about destigmatizing and having a lot of resources, but that's been a steady increase over the last 5 years. Mental illness is also a risk, right? So we talk about that a lot. Depression and bipolar disorder are the big ones we look at. People who have those experience an attempt or a completion of suicide at a 6 times higher rate, right? Chronic illness is also a factor in that. Again, this feeling of loss and hopelessness. Bipolar disorder, we really look at these really big highs and lows, right? When we're really low, there's not a lot of motivation for that. But when we start to feel better, it's like, oh, I just want to get out of this cycle, right? A lot of people really feel that. The other piece is that populations who experience extreme poverty or violence are twice as likely to attempt or complete suicide as well. So what are the risk factors? Right. So what do we need to look for if we think that people are maybe considering suicide, have suicidal thoughts, or maybe are in this space that we're not really sure where they're at, right? So in both children and adults, there's an increase of self-isolation. Right, I don't wanna be around my friends, I don't wanna be around my family, I don't wanna be around people that love me, I just isolate, isolate, isolate. Now, a lot of times it starts slow, like, "Oh, I'm just feeling really sad, I don't feel motivated to go out, I don't feel these things," and then it increases to where it's like I'm saying no to everything. The other piece is they stop planning. Even kids, we see this in teens a lot, but kids do this as well. I'm not I don't wanna go out and plan a play date with my friends. I don't wanna, go to a birthday party. I'm stop planning for my financial future. I'm not planning for things at work. I'm not picking up projects or things like that, right? All of that kind of stuff fades away. I don't care if my homework's done. I don't care if that project gets completed. That just kind of goes to the outskirts. Now, with kids, the other piece to really look out for is increase in risky behavior, right? So we see this with kids who are really starting to sink lower into depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts, meaning we're meeting with older adults, we're talking to people online we shouldn't be talking to, we started drinking, we started exploring with maybe drugs and things like that, but they're not actively thinking about their safety, they're not planning ahead, and it's not because they can't, it's because they don't want to. They don't care anymore, right? So they become really reckless in what they're doing, and that's really something we see as a key factor in that. Now, adults are a little bit different. They demonstrate a pretty big shift in a mood, right? So a lot of times what we see is somebody who is very down and maybe really isolated, but then seemingly the shift is positive. Oh, I'm starting to go through my closet. I'm giving all this stuff away. Yeah, I really miss those times, right? That happened. And it seems like kind of this reminiscing, really positive thing, but they're getting ready to not be here anymore. So we need to really think about that and ask questions when we start noticing, especially older adults in doing this, right? A lot of times they'll talk in past tense and they'll have an odd sense of calmness or resolve. Now, people are often like, Katie, what does that mean? An odd sense of calmness or resolve? A lot of times it's just kind of like when we're having a conversation, and maybe we're having a conversation that would typically bring out some passion in somebody. They're just kind of like, well, it just is what it is, and it's okay, and we don't need to worry about that. Everybody's gonna go away someday. We're not all gonna stay here, all that kind of stuff. We really, if we've kind of noticed that shift and it's really big, we must say, hey, can you kind of talk to me about what's going on? This seems out of character for you. I just want to talk and see if you're okay, right? Those are the things we really need to look for. So, here are 5 action steps of helping somebody who is in emotional pain, right? And this is for somebody who might have suicidal thoughts, who might be considering suicide. This is also just people who are in a really dark place, right? It might just be even the preset of that of I feel like I'm really dark. I feel like things are out of control. I don't feel like there's a lot of hope in the world, all of that kind of stuff, right? So a piece of this is really asking first, like, are you thinking about killing yourself? Now, everybody wants to say, oh, if you say that, it plants it. Nope. Research has shown if people are really thinking about it, they've already thought about it. That you asking the question isn't going to change it, right? But when we ask, it allows the person to open up about what's happening, right? And then we want to be an active listener, right? If they're saying, no, but here's all the things going on. And so I don't actually care if I'm here anymore or not. Okay, we might not actively be there, but we know we still need to get them some help. If they say yes, it's like, okay, hey, how can I support you, right? This is the next step in that. How do I keep you safe, right? And some of that is reducing access if you have a choice in that to lethal items, but some of it is also like, hey, how can we get you somewhere or get you some help or how can I support you through this? Let's call somebody together. Let's talk to somebody. If you are living in a different space where you can't physically go to that person, you can also always do a well-being check, right? So you can call your local police department, either non-emergency 9 or 911. Both will take the call and say, hey, I need to do a welfare check on this person, and here's their address. They will send an officer over just to make sure that they're okay. The other piece is really listening, right? And acknowledging their feelings. I'm not asking you to be a therapist. You don't need to tell them what to do, or you don't need to do all the things that I would do, but some of it is just listening. Wow, that sounds super hard. I am so sorry to hear that that's what you're going through. And then we can ask, hey, can we get you some help, right? So the next step has 2 numbers that I want you to write down, or this number that I want you to write down. This is the National Suicide Hotline now. They will connect you to people if somebody really is in that space. And they have resources, right? The other piece is you can always call your local Department of Human Services department, and they will also have resources for you as well. And so really getting people connected with the right mental health resources is so important. is so, so important for that. Sometimes it also takes us being like, I'll call with you, right? I do that with my clients. Hey, let's do this together. I'm going to call with you and we're going to make sure that you stay safe. And I'm going to walk this path with you as far as I can, right? But this is really important because I care and I love you this much that I want to make sure that we're safe, right? Just using that language. The other piece is making sure we're staying connected. A lot of times what I hear from people is like, yeah, my friend took me all the way through. We got connected with somebody. Maybe they were admitted to the hospital or not. We don't know. But then I never heard from them again. That is the last thing we wanna do. It's, "Hey, I wanna know how you're doing. Like, I'm gonna be your accountability buddy. Are you going to talk to your therapist? Are you talking with people who are helping you through this?" Any of that kinda stuff. You wanna stay connected. "Hey, let's go out for lunch. Let's get you out of the house." All of that kinda stuff is super important. The other piece is we also need to be sure that we are doing things to help ourselves, right? We want to reach out and create space. Now, this is for people who are impacted by suicide. This is for ourselves if we're impacted by it, but also again, if people are contemplating it, if you're helping somebody through a really tough time, that is really important, right? We need space for grief and we need connection with others. Those two things, if you take nothing else from this presentation, are what I want you to take. The other piece is seek professional help, right? Join support groups, find a good therapist, find the resources because sometimes you just need a space that is just yours that you can talk with somebody with who gets you, right? And who can help you through that step by step. But the other piece is don't tell yourself or others how to grieve. I hear all the time, well, I should be over this by now. I shouldn't be as upset. I wasn't their parent or I wasn't their whatever, and I'm still upset. That's okay, right? We judge ourselves so much on how we grieve that it actually is really harmful. I also say this, don't tell other people how they're supposed to be, right? It could be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and somebody is still upset or gets upset by certain things. And you say, hey, that's okay, right? People grieve differently. We're impacted at different times in our lives by this very thing. And so it's not okay to tell other people that they should be over it, and also don't tell yourself that you should be. It's a process, it's something that comes and goes in waves, and we just need to accept that. That brings us to the be patient, right? You have to be patient with yourself and others. This isn't something that just goes away overnight. Now, we always have to practice self care. One of the best ways to support somebody who is really going through a tough time is being an accountability buddy in self care. The biggest piece is keep moving. When we sit still, all of that emotion, all of that energy gets sucked into our body and it just grinds on us, right? Both physically and mentally. But if we can say, hey, every week we're going for a walk, every other day we're going for a walk, or hey, 12 o'clock, we're going to meet up at this park, we're going to go for a 30-minute walk. Whatever that looks like, go do something active. That could be a bike ride, it can be dancing, it can be whatever you want. I have people who go swimming. I have people who um, do all sorts of things, right? But we want to move. Just move, move, move as much as you can. The other piece is getting connected with our creative piece, right? So maybe that's listening to music, maybe that's painting or drawing or using clay, maybe it is creating something. I don't even care if it's on a computer, right? But being creative, using the things that we have in a different way to really express ourselves in a better place, right? That's really what I'm focusing on here. Now, you can use one and two together. Some of my closest friends I've met have been in like painting classes, right? That I've taken through our rec center or something. Like things like that can be really great to go do together to support each other through this. The other piece is being able to journal and get your thoughts and your expression out, right? So, journal all the things that are really challenging right now and the things that we can't control and that we need to put down on paper. But then on the flip side, what are things that we can control? What are things that we're thankful for, right? I know everybody talks about gratitude journals. A lot of people have differing opinions. What I tell people is do a positivity journal, do a success piece of that, right? So it can be, hey, I put on pants today and I haven't put on pants in a month. Oh my gosh, I'm writing that down. I'm gonna give myself a star for that, whatever this needs to look like. Some days, that's how I feel. "Oh my goodness, I put on real clothes today. That feels really positive. I'm glad about this," right? Maybe it's, "Hey, I ate healthy today, and that's something that I feel really good about. Hey, I went out for a 10-minute walk today. That's great. Hey, I called a friend when I was struggling." Whatever that looks like, put it down in that journal. The other piece is seeking professional help, right? All of us have heard the quote, "If you're sick, you would go see a doctor. Mental illness should be the same." Sure, if we're feeling down, we should go see them. And yes, that is so true. What I tell people is sometimes you just need a space, right? Coming to a professional is not about, "I'm weak, I don't know what to do, I don't have the skills, I need help," that way all the time, right? And sometimes it is. I don't wanna say that that's not a thing. But sometimes it's, "I have the skills, but they feel so locked down because I feel this weight that I just need to release somewhere." And what a great place to have somebody who knows how to help us through that, do that for us, right? That's a huge piece. Engage in social interactions. Again, if nothing else comes out of this, get in person with people. Get in person with people. Engage with people face to face. Read body language. Go to dinner. Go sit and have coffee. Go sit at a lake and watch clouds go by. I don't care what it looks like, but get in person with people. That is our best defense against mental health stuff. It is our best defense against anxiety and depression and all of that. The other piece is really starting to create that routine that separates our work life and our home life, even if we're working from home. So, you know, doing the same things every day. How do we get ready every day for work? Even though we're going downstairs to our office, how do we leave work? We need to leave it in our office. We need to come home in a different way. Maybe that's actually taking what your commute time used to be and going for a walk or doing something like that, right? Just recently, one of my friends, and we're stealing this idea, with her kids, she comes home and the first thing they do is go for a walk as a family so the kids can decompress and they can decompress. And when they come into the home environment, oh my goodness, we can engage in such a different way, right? Maybe that's what we need to do. But really creating that daily routine and structure is huge in that. So, why is all of this important? Well, we need to reduce our stress levels, right? We have such a stress problem in our world right now that it is inhibiting us from being healthy, right? So we need to reduce it. We need to do things that are going to calm us down, but we need to open it up in creativity, right? So nature is endless in its resource. Whether that's I need vitamin D, so I'm gonna go get some sunshine, whether that's I'm gonna go paint a picture of something because I see something beautiful outside in the world, whether it's I'm gonna use, the ground beneath my feet to go for a bike ride. I'm gonna use the ground beneath my feet to ground myself to something that's real, right? That's huge. We need to be able to grasp that creativity and that movement in our life. The other piece is really being more present. When we can engage in the moment and say, "Okay, one-on-one, I'm here, I can be present with this person," we get endorphins from that, right? We get that dopamine kick, we get that feel-good stuff, right? But that's also engaging with ourselves. So practicing things like being mindful, and I'm not saying everybody has to do yoga or mindfulness practice or any of that. Sometimes it's just like, "Hey, I'm gonna take a moment and check in. How's my chest feeling? How's my stomach feeling? Where are my legs at? How am I doing this?" Right? Where is my mental state at? Do I feel focused? Yes or no, right? That's checking in, that's being present. This improves our mood overall. It gets us really connected, and it has a long-term outcome, right? The positive outcome is long-term rather than short-term, right? Social media short-term. It's quick dopamine fixes. When we create these routines and being more present and mindful, it's a long-term impact. The other piece is your physical health gets better, right? When we start moving our body, when we start decreasing our stress hormones, our physical health will change, right? I've heard some very powerful stories about reducing the stress in our lives and how that has shifted, right? I have a friend, and I hope she doesn't care. I don't think she does that I shared this because she shares it a lot. Who was diagnosed with cancer and she was in a really bad situation. She removed herself from that situation. The cancer went away. Like that is powerful stuff, right? I've have lots of stories of people who have reduced stress and lost a ton of weight, right? And who have gotten in really great physical health. I have had lots of stories of heart conditions getting better. Like that is huge. So we need to be really mindful and do that as well. As far as leadership goes, here's a really good thing to do. Check in with our employees regularly, right? Engage, right? Engage with people and doing it in a meaningful way. Don't just say, "Hey, how you doing?" And somebody says, "Fine." Okay, great. And we move on. No, fine is not an answer. Okay, I hound people in my therapy sessions about this. Fine is not an answer. Tell me how you're doing. Where's your mental state at? Where's your physical state at? Tell me where your family's at. Do things feel stressful? Has it been raining every day and we're like sad because we can't go outside? Like, let's talk about it, right? But then the other piece is we have to model as leaders healthy behavior. So if we're working 24/7, our employees are going to work 24/7, right? We feel the need to do that. If we model boundaries and start saying, "Yeah, I'm doing my workout at 5 p.m. I'm going to yoga. I'm going to have dinner with a friend, whatever." We're showing people that that's a good thing to do. So we need to model that behavior. We also need to destigmatize stress and anxiety, right? We can promote mental health resources, we can promote our company stuff and say, hey, everybody gets here. If you need help, let me help you, right? That's sometimes all people need. Let me help you. We have resources. Everybody gets here, right? It's okay. Let's figure it out together. And that's really what we need to start doing. Here are some book recommendations for us. I think I love all three of these. Presence is a really good one about how to be in the moment and mindful. Laughing at My Nightmare is really fun because it's somebody who is going through physical ailments and who really talks deeply about all the emotional things that go with that, right? Both positive and negative, and how do we get through this? And it's okay that you're not okay is a really big one as well. I give this to a lot of people who have chronic conditions as well as experiencing grief and loss, um, because we just feel like we should be okay all the time, and that's not true, right? And so it really dives deep into like, how do we understand ourselves and other people when we just don't feel okay? And that's okay, right? So this is a great quote by Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. So I would love everybody to write this down and post it, right? No matter what we're doing, we have to take a step. And that's really, especially in a world that we're so digitally connected, so many people are so filled with anxiety, depression, who have a rise in suicide. We have to keep moving forward in order to support each other. So I hope you all enjoyed this today. And I look forward to speaking with you all again. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to ask. You can always reach us or myself at the email below. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks.